Number 22, we're switching gears a little bit, and now we're moving to solving quadratic equations. So we have a squared minus 8a plus 18 equals negative 4. Now you always want to try to solve these using the diamond first, and if that doesn't work, then you can move to some of the other options. So in order to solve using the diamond, you have to have everything to one side and 0 to the other. So in this problem, if we imagine adding that 4 to the other side, so we end up with a squared minus 8a plus 18, a squared minus 8a plus 22, we have to see if there are any numbers that multiply to 22 and add up to negative 8, in which case there are not. So we're moving to another way of doing this. Now, the other ways at this point are quadratic formula, which is that x equals negative b plus or minus, that big long thing that you all had to memorize, or completing the square. So looking at this, I think completing the square would be a little bit easier because we have nothing in front of the a squared and we have an even number for a. So watch how easy this is. So we have, what we want to do is we're going to take half of negative 8, which is negative 4, and negative 4 squared is 16. So we add 16 here, but to keep our equation balanced, we have to add 16 to the opposite side as well. Okay? Anytime you have an equal sign in there, and something on either side of the equal sign, on both sides, you have to keep your equation balanced at all times, okay? So always remember that. So now what we have created is a perfect square trinomial that factors to a minus 4 squared. And on the right-hand side, negative 22 plus 16, that's negative 6. All right, so now it's super easy from here. So opposite of squaring is square root. We have a minus 4 equals, remember, a negative underneath a radical morphs into an I outside of the radical. So this becomes plus or minus I radical 6. And the last step is to add 4 to both sides. So a equals 4 plus or minus I root 6. Okay? Super easy, right? Okay, moving along. Let's look at number 23. 23 is another quadratic equation that needs to be solved. So we have 13 equals 1 minus 22r minus 8r squared. So again, let's just try getting everything to one side and 0 to the other and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract 13 from both sides. And I'm going to flip it around because for me personally, I like to see everything on the left and 0 on the right when I'm solving these. I don't know what's up with that, but you can obviously leave it in that other way. But for me personally, I like to see it in the opposite way. So here we go. Negative 8r squared minus 22r, and then 1 minus 13 is negative 12 equals 0. Okay, always look for a greatest common factor first, okay? So I'm looking at these and going, I can factor out a negative 2. They're all negative, and I, quite frankly, am not the biggest fan of dealing with negative numbers, so I'm going to factor that out. So I'm left with 4r squared plus 11r plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so let's try this using our lovely diamond, okay? And when we do that, up at the top we have 4 times 6 is 24, bottom is 11. Two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 11, that would be 8 and 3. And the quick way again, we take the leading term, make a couple of fractions and reduce them. So 4r over 8, that reduces to r over 2. And 4r over 3, that's as reduced as that's going to get, equals 0. So what we end up with, we have that negative 2 from before. We have to make sure we bring that down. And then we ended up with r plus 2, and we ended up with 4r plus 3 equals 0. Okay? So now it's just a matter of setting both of these equations equal to 0 and solving. Some people get really bothered by this negative or this coefficient out in front, but check it out. If you divide it by both sides, then it's gone and you don't have to deal with it. Because what is 0 divided by anything? 0, right? Okay. So we're left with r plus 2 equals 0 and 4r plus 3 equals 0. So if we subtract 2, r equals negative 2. And then if we subtract 3 and then divide by 4, we get r equals negative 3 over 4. And we're done. All right, let's look at, let me just flip it over to the next side, and let's go ahead and go through, I think I have room on this page. Let's do number 24 on the same page. Okay, so 24, we've got, make sure you can see that. Number 24, we ended up with 16b squared plus 1 equals 10. And if I subtract 1, again, there are a couple of different ways you can do this. I'm going to just isolate the b squared here. So we get b squared. Okay, so we divide by 16 on both sides. So we're pretending that that b squared is just a b. And watch how easy this is. The only last thing we have to do is do the opposite of squaring, which is square root. And we get the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 16 is 4. We put the plus or minus there again because if you multiply positive 3/4 times positive 3/4, you end up with positive 9/16. If you multiply negative 3/4 by negative 3/4, you also end up with positive 9/16. So that's the reason for that. Since we are in the whole find all the roots mode, let's go ahead and do number 25. And then we'll switch over. Okay, find all the roots of f of x equals x squared plus 6x plus 2. So again, this one, if we try the diamond, finding the roots means you set the equation equal to 0 and solve. If we try the diamond, we can just visualize this in our heads. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to 2 and add up to 6. That does not exist. So we have other options that we have to go towards. A lot of people would like to use the quadratic formula in this, and that's perfectly fine. It's a wonderful tool. That's why it exists. But my opinion is that completing the square is going to be a little easier here because, again, we have an even middle term and nothing in front of x squared. That makes for a very, very great completing the square problem. Balance our equation. Okay? So, to complete the square, half of 6 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So we add 9 to both sides. And the way that we write this in factored form is x plus 3 squared. We have created a perfect square trinomial, hence completing the square. Okay, negative 2 plus 9 is 7. And then the opposite of squaring is square root. So we get x plus 3 equals plus or minus root 7. And then subtract 3 from both sides. So we have x equals negative 3 plus or minus root 7. All right. Go ahead and switch over to the next video.